You're listening to Shoe In, covering the ins and outs of all things footwear, from sneakers to heels, loafers to slippers, and every type of shoe in between. Brought to you by the FDRA, the Footwear Industries Association focused on retail, trade, politics, and fashion, helping create and enhance conversations on all things footwear. And now your footwear insiders, Matt Priest and Andy Polk.
Folks, there are so many people out there working so hard during this time, transforming operations, giving it everything you got, Captain. You're upgrading the speeds as fast as you can on the quantum mechanic machines you've got. I know you are. So, you know, we've been having conversations with executives, with workers, with numbers of people who contact us daily, asking for best practices, tips, what other people are doing in the industry. So we've done a lot more webinars. We're doing more podcasts than ever before in order to help spread best practices and make our industry stronger. That's really what this podcast is all about. So this is an important conversation that we taped recently on a webinar. And I do want to bring in Matt Priest, my co-host, and of course, Jasmine Pendergrass. A part of this, guys, is really about new tools, new ways of doing business, new partnerships, all the above, right? In this day and age, it's got to be all the above.
Yeah, I mean, the business of innovation is alive and well right now, Andy, as we all know. We're all getting bombarded with the next great thing. And the beauty of this time, the silver lining, I think, is watching our footwear members try on and kick the tires and try to break all these new technologies to try to reach more people and connect with people. And it's painful, and there's right sizing, and there's a lot of control deleting in this environment. But at the same time, I think we'll be stronger for it on the back end. And that's why I think this conversation is so helpful.
Yeah. And folks, this is a longer conversation. This is one of the longer podcasts that we will drop, but the conversation was so good on the webinar, I could not help but bring it to the podcast. I could not help but bring it.
I tried to stop people.
I tried to stop myself. I tried to stop myself, and I just couldn't. I had an extra cup of coffee before this, and I am just ready to go. I'm gonna run through a wall like the Kool-Aid man. Let's get on this. Let me tell you, Dan. We had Dan Post Boot Company on our webinar recently, sponsored by First Insight. First Insight's a partner of ours. They're doing great work for a lot of brands. And this is really interesting because First Insight brought up new behavioral data on shoe buyers, how comfortable they are in stores, what they're looking for, brand new data. So we had to bring this to you. In addition, one of the product development leads at Dan Post talks about their evolution and change during COVID, how they're changing up lines, how they're trying to communicate differently, all their operational adjustments, and how they're using First Insight to ensure they have those margins, right? So it's about making sure that they have the right product at the right price at the right channel. So with that, I'm going to quit talking because I'll keep talking forever. And we're going to roll this audio, and you're going to be amazed. And I'll bring Jasmine on the back end who helped me run this webinar, and we'll talk a little bit about the highlights. So let's go ahead and hit it now. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the FDRA webinar today. Welcome. I'm going to go over some quick items as we get started and as we have more and more people jump on with us. We're starting right off at 11 a.m. to respect your time in this digital age. We know everybody's super busy. But first of all, I just want to let everybody know this is being recorded. So as you watch this and you find a point or something that you want to go back to later, we're recording this. We will send it out after the fact so that you can get a recording of this, as well as send it out to your colleagues in case they could not join us for some reason. During the presentation today, as we go through, I encourage you, if there's a point that pops in your head or a question, please type it out in the Q&A box that's on the screen. That way you don't forget what the question is, but we will get to all the questions at the end of the presentation and cover all those things that you want to have a little deeper dive into. Things we're covering today, why this is such an important webinar, I think, and I think most of us already know what it is. It's about margins. It's about operations. But starting off our conversation today, I'm really pleased to have First Insight join us again on another webinar. First Insight, of course, is delivering a ton of information about how consumers feel about shopping right now, consumer behavior. And so right at the very start, Gretchen's going to jump in from First Insight and really share behaviors right now of consumers shopping in stores, how they feel. And this is brand new data. It's stuff we haven't seen before. So joining us today, you get it live in person. And then we're going to transition to Dan Post Boot Company with Stephanie. And this is really a hugely important conversation that we're going to have today around new operations, new models, new ways of doing business, new ways to think about how we do business. And a part of that will be technology. We'll be retooling what we're doing. And a large discussion of that kind of operational changes will be technology, especially using First Insight. And this is an important conversation because we see costs in the supply chain increasing, especially because of tariffs and other things. We see a lot of people trying to, consumers wanting discounts. So we see a huge kind of squeeze to our margins by costs, by discounting. And so it really is about getting the right shoes at the right price to the right consumer in the right channel in the right way. And that's difficult, but there are tools now that can help us do that. And so with that, I want to thank everybody for joining us. I know the people are constantly joining in. Welcome. Right off the bat, we're going to jump into that consumer behavior data. And Gretchen, I just want you to quickly jump in, introduce yourself really quickly, give a quick blurb about First Insight. We'll go into more about what First Insight is and how it's helping brands transform. But I know a lot of people are really interested about this new data that you guys have collected.
Thanks very much, Andy. Just a quick introduction of myself. I have spent my career in B2B and B2C marketing in Europe and the US, from KitchenAid appliances to automotive coatings to wearable tech, and now finally landed, excited to be here in predictive analytics for retail. And I've been with First Insight for about 6 years, and I lead the demand generation and marketing function of the company. And just a quick background on First Insight. The company was founded back in 2007 and really created the space of digital pre-market testing of new products that's powered by the voice of the customer specifically. And so now, retailers and brands, large and small, from Kohl's and Marks and Spencer to Dick's Sporting Goods to, smaller companies like Tervis Tumblers, are using First Insight to help them develop and launch successful products. And, so 24 to 48 or maximum 72 hours after launching a test, companies have results to inform their product decisions. So diving into some of the data that Andy had mentioned, we're really focused at First Insight on understanding the customer and really, most importantly, helping our retailer and brand partners understand customers. And so as a service to the industry during this crazy, unprecedented time, we've been really trying to provide useful information to the industry at large. And, so one of the things we've been doing is running a series of consumer studies. We started back on February 28th, before there were even any, deaths from COVID in the United States. And, we've been running these consumer studies ever since, and feeding this information out to the market, and FDRA has been partnering with us actually to help get this information out, which we appreciate. So, one dimension we've looked at is how worried are people about the coronavirus. And, interestingly, we saw that it was running at about kind of 67%, 66% back end of February. Then there was a big jump, not surprisingly, as things heated up. But then it ramped back down again to that end of April time point. But since then, with the continued, cases and outbreaks in different areas, we've seen, a much slower decline back almost to where we were when we started as of July. Interestingly, though, when we look at coronavirus impact on consumer purchase decisions, we saw that similar ramp up, very quick ramp up, and then reduction by kind of that April 20th timeframe when things seem to be sort of calming down, but then a bit more of an uptick by end of April as, again, those hotspots were emerging. And trailing off to, where we're still actually looking at 77% of people saying that's impacting their purchase decisions versus 44% back, before things really heated up in the U.S. So, basically not back to normal yet in that regard by any means. We've also been kind of tracking where consumers, what they say about feeling safe or not, trying products in store and engaging in certain activities in store. And so looking at this specifically related to footwear, we've also looked at how they feel about trying beauty products and trying on clothing in store. But for this audience, let's talk about footwear. So, stores are obviously reopening. I mean, lots of them are already open, but consumers still have some concerns, particularly when it comes to, trying on shoes, for example. And so, we've seen that women and baby boomers were expressing the most concern, with 61% and 67% respectively saying that they don't really feel safe trying on shoes in store. Whereas, men and millennials were the least concerned at, under half of them expressing those same kinds of concerns. Now looking at, the store environment and where do people say that they're feeling safe or not, shopping. So, not too surprisingly, we see that the store environments where people have been shopping all along, frankly, grocery stores and some of the big drugstore chains are the ones where people say that they feel most comfortable. Whereas on the other end of the spectrum, shopping malls and department stores continuing to be places where people feel less comfortable and less safe. And this ranking has stayed pretty consistent across the studies that we've done. And, so this is something that's obviously of importance to footwear companies, given that, they're selling through a lot of these channels. So it's important to keep in mind where people feel safe and where they feel less safe. Then, Andy he's spot on with his comments about, it's really about the profitability and, with rising costs of footwear, then, understanding how these consumer value equations are shifting so dramatically and so quickly is really important for footwear companies. And so, it's hard now for brands and retailers to know how deep they really need to go on discounting, and getting that price point right is more important now probably than ever. So the latest studies that we did showed that men are needing slightly lower discounts on average than women. So 45% of men versus a third of women being motivated by a 33% a 30% discount or less. Where when we look at the generations, we see that baby boomers at 17% were the most likely to say, I'm not really interested in buying footwear right now, regardless of the discount. So, given their purchasing power, that's a bit of a concern. But then, millennials and Gen Xers, if you see the 24 and 25% of the black box there, that's a 50% or more discount that they're looking for. So, they seem to be interested in seeing pretty deep discounts in order to motivate their purchases. Now, one, bright spot, let's say something moving in a good direction, is that when we talk about the development from end of April to mid-July, when it comes to consumers' views on their footwear purchase behavior overall, we're seeing that the percentage of consumers who say that they're buying more footwear now versus pre-pandemic actually went up by half, right, from 10% to 15%, and then a commensurate decline in the number of people saying that they're buying less. So, that certainly seems to be trending in the right direction. Perhaps this is driven by back to school. Perhaps it's driven by a change of seasons coming. Whatever the reasons, we certainly hope for all of us that trend continues. And we are continuing to publish these reports, and we'll stay in touch with FDRA about helping to get the information out to you. And you're also welcome at any time to reach out to us to request a full copy across all the categories, et cetera. So, just to frame things up a bit here before I hand over to Stephanie, I want to talk a little bit about some key trends that we've been seeing overall among retailers and brands as we all face coronavirus together. So, as we talked about earlier, the consumer value equations are really shifting quite quickly and dramatically. And, the usual tools that we normally have at our disposal, samples, maybe in-store testing, showrooms, doing line reviews in person with your team, those tools just aren't available to us right now. And, in that context, also the need for speed is very real. And, so in that context, we're seeing more and more retailers and brands reaching out for new digital tools and data sources to inform their decisions. And while many, frankly, have just been trying to weather the storm and, hoping to ride it out, a growing number are actually viewing this current situation as an opportunity to really accelerate their adoption of tools that they have in place, maybe, 3D and such, and their implementation of new tools. And, I'd say that Dan Post Boot is definitely one of those companies that you're going to hear from in a minute. But, these companies are positioning themselves to actually emerge stronger and better coming out of this current crisis, taking it as a catalyst, as an accelerant, versus all negative. So, with that, I'd like to hand things over to Stephanie so that she can share your story, moderated by our friend Andy.
Thank you. My name is Stephanie Greenfield, and I am the Managing Director of Product Development at Dan Post Food Company. I have been with Dan Post for about 11 years and work very close with our product development team to work on every line release that comes out. As we've mentioned, it's become challenged, but with those challenges, I think that we're retooling the way that we do business, and in the end, we will be better for it. Dan Post, who we are a company that manufactures and designs footwear. Our footwear brands include Dan Post, Laredo Western Boots, Dingo 1969, and McCrae. We started in the 1960s, and we're really known for having a great fit with our footwear. So for us, it's really for having a really nice handcrafted and well-made boot. We design work boots, Western boots, casual boots for both men, women, and children. And so in this, as we have pointed out, we're looking at how to kind of tackle all of these angles and how to properly design and get the product right for the consumer during these challenging times.
Yeah, and let's talk a little bit about that, because I think, first of all, as we get into those issues, before we came on, we were talking about industry-wide issues, challenges, what we're hearing from people. Obviously, we all had a lot of challenges right during when COVID hit and everything started shutting down. We've, even Gretchen saw on the data, and even the data we've seen, obviously there's been an upswing to consumer purchasing. There's still been some challenges. There may be some challenges this year. Obviously, we're going to see declines for this calendar year. But in Q1, obviously, there's some bright spots. There's some, more retailers are looking to purchase and restock their inventory. So maybe really quickly, you can just tell us really quickly about the pivots you made during COVID and some of the things that you're seeing right now. And then we'll get into kind of, and that leads into this digital product testing. Like, obviously, we're all working remotely and there's not really many options to get together.
No, absolutely. So working through COVID, definitely had its challenges. I think that towards the end, as everyone, we kind of definitely saw it hit us hard, right? I think it hit everyone very, very hard. But working through that, we are now seeing a bright spot. As we discussed, Andy, our Q1 really just started, and we really are starting to see. It's interesting with the information that Gretchen pointed out. Men's footwear, definitely the sales were there, but we're starting to see an uptick in ladies. So that's interesting that your information is kind of aligning with our information as well. So we are definitely seeing a light at the end of the tunnels. Finger crossed. So yeah, for sure.
Great. So obviously we all had to work from home. And Gretchen talked a little bit about that, about sampling. Like, obviously we couldn't go to China. We couldn't go to many of the factories, which is a completely different discussion. But as you lead product and you have to, do the sampling and get the right styles and make sure the fit is correct and the stitching's right and all those things that make footwear so hard to do. What were some of the key things that you were looking at around how you change your operations? So, especially to this question that we have on the screen, this move to digital product testing with First to Insight. What have you guys tried to accomplish? What are the benefits that you're seeing?
So definitely our goals were, we started this about a year ago and before COVID, but it's been great since we've had it before then. But really the need for speed, as we know, trying to figure out designs are changing so quickly. We've got to make sure that we're spending so much money and time on development, whether it's with our development team or just, samples are expensive, and air freight, let's not kid ourselves. I mean, air freight these days is just skyrocketed. So we were trying to figure a way to take away that time frame. We'll get into this later, but materials, now it's taking so much longer to get materials. Your samples are taking longer, and then you have to pay for them. So we're really trying to figure out, okay, how can we make sure that, one, our product is right, we get it out there faster, and we reduce cost on all aspects. So that was really kind of, from a product development side, what we were really looking at to get from First Insight.
What about from the salesman perspective? Because sometimes we only think about samples in terms of making sure that the factory can make it correctly and know, what they're making. We forget that we have to have a lot of samples for these sales guys that go out and they want to touch and feel. So what is the feel for where the sales guys are at this point, who've been doing it for forever? What kind of data have you got to help them out at this time? Right.
No, it's a great question, right? Because to your point, this was our hardest thing. And this is what I love about First Insight. So I think a lot of our guys, they've been in it for years. They're pros, right? But they're pros and they're used to having that material, like you said, they can touch, they can feel. It is part of their sales tooling, right? So really, and one thing that I really wanted to get from First Insight, which has helped, is that when we're in these line meetings, like you said, with these samples, it's so much of an emotional reaction to product, right? Whether it's right or wrong, it's emotional, like, oh, I love this, but do we always know if it's going to sell or no? So what I kind of wanted to do is, because we have with Dan Post, which is great, but we have a lot of different generations now. We've got the younger versus the old. So First Insight, what it does is we are testing surveyors, and not only just anyone, but people that are actually our consumers. So they've made sure that we're testing people that actually buy our product, and we can determine what age groups we want to test. And then we go into these meetings with our salesmen who want to touch and feel all these samples, and we have information that we can lay out there for them to show, okay, we're not just saying that you should, adopt this crazy style. The information here shows that the end consumer really wants it. So that is something that I'm not saying it happened every night, Andy, but it's definitely something that's helped us kind of persuade salesmen that are used to doing things a certain way.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. All right, I think we'll go to the next slide here. And I think around that, I want to bring in Gretchen to talk about that process. Like, how do we get to the process of getting that data and getting it to those line reviews and getting it to even production? Like, how do we make the right product? How do we set it at the right price, Gretchen? How do you guys do this?
Thanks, Andy. So, springboarding off what Stephanie was talking about, essentially just take a couple minutes to talk about how the solution works. And, we did really create and pioneer this space of digital product testing powered by the voice of the customer. We get the input directly from consumers. So this is done digitally. And, good news is that given that it's digital, it still works even in these times when it's difficult to get, direct interaction. We apply our proprietary algorithms to the data that we collect, as Stephanie said, from consumers who are purchasers of Dan Post Boot. Now, different companies may do this differently, right? If you're a retailer like a Kohl's and you have a large consumer database, then testing can be done against that database. In the case of more wholesale brands, it's often done where we help, as Stephanie just described, access these respondents through some of our panel partners, but make sure that we're talking to the right audience, right? And then, we essentially provide actionable results within 24 to 48, maybe 72 hours to, ensure that we've got actionable results back quickly, as Stephanie talked about the need for speed. And this is a cloud-based software as a service solution used by small brands all the way up to very, very large ones, and can test a few products to literally thousands of products every month. So that's in a nutshell how it works. Moving on then to give a little bit of a feel for, how this looks to a consumer who's getting a test. Now, this isn't exactly a Dan Post Boot test because that's kind of their proprietary information, but this gives an idea of what this would look like to a consumer. So they'd receive either an email or a message via social media saying, hey, would like your opinion about these new styles from Dan Post. And so, then they're presented a series of products, and, we can accommodate 3D images as you're seeing here, or CADs or sketches, or actual, photographs of existing product samples, if that's what you have. And then the consumer gives input about what they think somebody would pay. Do I love it or hate it? There's the opportunity to give actual verbatim comments. And you'd be surprised, but people love to have their opinion asked. And so they often actually put things in. And, Stephanie, I think, would agree that some of those comments are super helpful to designers and, other members of the team to really understand what's resonating and what isn't, and why. Because when they comment, that it's that they don't like the shape of the toe, or they don't like, that color that's on the shaft. So that can be super helpful. And then, moving forward to what Stephanie was talking about the information that's then available to our customers, you get a ranking of products, in this case ranked by value score, which is a predictor of an item's eventual performance in the market. We actually are able to test in over 30 different countries. So those are combinations of language and currency. And, this is extremely important for some of our customers who are trying to figure out global product ranges and, what to put where. And then we also provide detailed information about pricing. And this is used by our customers to pick initial price points, but also markdown cadences. And then this is likewise really helpful going into a conversation with a retail partner, right? So you're armed with data that can help you make the case for why something should be at one price point versus another. And then we're able to also segment the data along various dimensions. In some cases, wholesale brands would like to look at this by retail partner, what's resonating with certain retailers' customers. In the case of Dan Post, it's very important also for them to understand from a regional perspective what's resonating where across the U.S. And so that's one of the key segmentation dimensions that they use. So in a nutshell, that's an overview of the First Insight solution.
I think it's really good to talk a little bit about that segmentation, because we oftentimes in the industry have made the mistake of being so broad. We make one shoe and we think it's going to sell everywhere, right? Like it just that, and especially I would say, you know, Stephanie, with boots, I mean, just looking at this, you look at the West versus the Northeast, and there's just two different demographics, two different people, right? So talk a little bit about that, about the segmentation of this data that you get.
Oh, absolutely. And that is that right there is on every test that we do, because depending on, it is so specific. I mean, the Southeast versus, you know, the Northwest to the Southwest. I mean, everyone is so different. So we need to make sure that for certain styles, they're catered for a certain region. And then there's some styles, right, that you want volume-wise to try to reach the whole country. So we're trying to make sure on each test that we're getting to that right consumer and at the right price. So yeah, it's very valuable information. Great.
All right. So let's talk quick about implementation, because I think this is the key thing is how does technology fit into our culture as a brand, as a company? How do we make sure our folks understand the value of it, that they adopt it? So let's just talk a little bit about how, you know, you guys started with the implementation of this program. Obviously, you guys were ahead of the game, ahead of most people. You started before COVID hit, so you're not swimming without a life raft, I guess. You've got the life raft. We're still in choppy waters, still some white waters, but at least you got a light raft. You have a raft that you got. So maybe talking about how you guys set it up. Did you guys have a dedicated team? Did you have a lead? How did you get buy-in from people at the company? How did you get buy-in from these sales guys to say, my gut's telling me this, but the data's telling me that? You know, kind of give us some play-by-play.
Absolutely. So it was brought to us about a year ago. And actually the beauty of this is one of our sales managers actually met with First Insight. I believe it was out at Platform. And they came back and they're like, you've got to adopt it. So it's actually a beautiful situation that it was their idea. And then we met with First Insight and decided that, yes, it would be something great for us. But in order to get that really going, like you discussed, we really wanted to make sure that we had someone dedicated at Dan Post to really manage it, because, you know, we didn't want to put more stuff on our designers' plates or someone else's, and then it just be everyone's taking on more responsibilities and not succeeding. So we have someone at Dan Post that is dedicated to working with the account manager at First Insight to get all the information uploaded and help run each test. And that right there it's been fantastic. They know First Insight way better than I do, and they worked really amazingly with the account manager. So having a process set up and understanding what we need before we implement a test, why we are implementing a test, and what the outcome that we want out of that test, I think are all the questions that we ask, and then they're able to run it, and it's been really great.
And I'm guessing too, and Gretchen, I can bring you into this as well, but we talk about implementation of programs. Obviously, this is cloud-based, so it's not like you need a large software investment or implementation into your system, though I'm sure if you wanted to plug into a PLM or other systems, that data can flow back and forth. Is that correct?
That is absolutely correct. And so I think Stephanie's spot on in saying that, you know, the important thing, and probably what takes some more focus and effort, is really, you know, making sure you've got the right team in place, making sure that you've got the processes set up to actually have it timing wise work out that you can make use of the information to inform the decisions. That tends to be, quite honestly, you know, more of a challenge and time consuming than the actual implementation of the technology, because, you know, it's a cloud-based system. So, you know, within a couple of weeks, people are certainly able to be up to speed and running this successfully. But, you know, making sure that you've got that dedicated person and you have buy-in from the sales team. It's beautiful when the idea comes from the sales team. I mean, fantastic. But, you know, that's not necessarily always the case. Not everybody maybe on the webinar today is in the sales team. And so, you know, driving that adoption can be interesting, especially, frankly, you know, let's call a spade. People are used to going by their gut, like Stephanie was saying. And, you know, and a lot of these decisions have been emotional, and that's great. I mean, no one's ever going to take away that gut and that eye. But this is really designed to make that even better, augment, be an additional tool that helps to make fact-based decisions and, come to your retail partners with data to be able to make the case.
And I think that's a great point is we're talking about, when we think about data and we think about our gut, more is always better. Like get as many data points as you can. Use your data system, use your mailing list, use First Insight, use your sales by channels, and then sit down and have your sales team talk about how they feel about it, and then figure out where it is in the middle. I think that's really where it's at, but we've really lacked intense data like First Insight provides us on price, on product, even segmentation. That's what blows me away is what area of the country would this sell in so that we can actually, make the number that we need and not have these sitting in a warehouse somewhere that we got to drop off somewhere. So that's, and Stephanie's, you can chime in on that if you'd like.
No, that's huge. And that is another, if we want to go back to another reason why we wanted to do First Insight, I think all departments kind of had their reason. Product development had ours because we wanted to, have information quickly, kind of wanted to validate why a boot should go into a line. But for sales and for our finance department, they're looking at, like you say, our inventory, let's have more of the A and B styles and let's not even worry about closeouts. Mm. So it really, that goes back to our previous statement, but that was a really great thing too, is because everyone sat down through the whole company and sat down and thought, okay, there's reasons from every department of how we can benefit from this. So, yeah.
Fantastic. All right. So let's talk a little bit about how it supports sell-in with retailers. So you go to a retail partner. We talked a lot about line review and talked a lot about internal stuff at Dan Post Boot Company and what you guys are doing internally with your teams. But now you got to go to a retailer and now you got to convince them that better than they do what's going to sell. How does this work?
Well, so, and this has been, so we're just starting to get this information, which is exciting. But yes, to your point, we go in, and most customers also, they're used to going with their gut. A lot of these buyers have been doing this for years, and they are very good at what they do. So at first, that might be a little difficult, but I think when you start to see the numbers, and one thing that we're starting to see, which is very exciting and just helps to prove the argument, is that the ones that are scoring really well, we're starting to see that retail also starting to, I was waiting for the full circle and it's starting to happen. And that's what's really, really exciting because your case is, it's well-rounded, it's built, you can show, okay, from conception to, buy-in to sell-through, we are hitting all check marks. So I think we're starting to see that because we've just been, like I said, with First Insight for a year, but that's really, and that also just helps increase our salesmen when we're at these line meetings because we're like, okay, we see it. So it's really starting to work out nicely.
Or if they, the retailer decides to go in a different direction, you have that I told you so moment where it's like, right. I told you so, right?
Right.
You don't like saying that stuff, but it does kind of feel good when you can validate that you had the right decision and they didn't, and it grows the confidence in the brand versus the retailer that a little bit better. Another key thing too, I know is, we're looking at traditionally for shoes, we've always talked about quarters or seasons, and now we're getting into instead of 4 times a year, we got to have new product refresh. We're talking 6 and 8. Yeah. So I'm sure that keeps you up at night running product. But how does this help with that kind of maybe making less of a certain type and integrating more? Tell us a little bit about that.
No, it does, because to your point, we are now doing 6, lines a year. And that is, to your sample cost and everything else. These poor designers, they're like pulling their hair out thinking how they're going to design this quickly. But I do think that's where we kind of use First Insight to test what do we really need, when do we need it, and kind of it helps us. We test maybe a lot at one time, and then we determine we might hold a few back. We know that they're good sellers, but we might hold them back for a next line 2. We're testing season, customer, price, and trying to figure out, okay, when and where does this fit? Because to your point, there 6 lines a year is a lot to ask out of, people. And at each one of these line presentations, the salesman and also the customer, they want to see a lot of product. I mean, it's really trying to be creative with when we test product and how.
And the last part of this really is the pricing, right? What's the contract going to look like when we sign, when we're going to discount, what day we're going to do it, what all those minutia details. And I'm sure things are changing now rapidly and people are going back to contracts, trying to rewrite things. But how does this help set a better standard for your pricing, your margins, but also just your brand? I think a lot of people, obviously we want to move product, but we don't want to move product at 40% all the time, because then it becomes a question of the brand's value to the consumer.
Absolutely. No, so I do think it's very important, because you want to make sure, and that's the great thing about First Insight. It'll show you at the high end, where your max volume is going to be, which we all want that, and then it tapers down. So we do like to see that and see that margin, but in some aspects, a really great thing when you're testing these on First Insight and pricing and see where you need to be, we've had a few surprises which are great, in which we found out that the customer is actually willing to pay more for a product. And that is a wonderful, because, again, we're putting prices out there thinking that we know what a customer is willing to buy when we test. In a few instances, and they've been higher in product, they're actually willing to spend more, and they get, value scores of 8s and 9s. So we know, one, they love it and they're willing to pay more. So in cases like that, we're actually able to say, okay, we can get a little bit more margin here and make it there. And then in other cases, so it really does help understand your customer more and price points, which you kind of thought you knew, but maybe there's some nice surprises in there as well. So that's kind of how we're going around that.
Great point. I think we forget that we could charge more. Let's charge more.
Yeah.
All right, let's go to the next one. So here's a use case, and you can cover this, and Gretchen, you can join in as well. But we're looking at manufacturing costs to sales costs. This is the margin area, right? So maybe Stephanie, you can take us through it really quickly, yeah. and Gretchen, you can just provide some color on the back end of this of what we're looking at right here by country of origin segmentation.
Sure. So a lot of, things that we're looking at when you're testing product, sometimes when you're testing an assortment, you have all these different variables and you're not sure what is either persuading someone to like something or not like something. So in this case that you're looking at, we were looking at maybe moving some product to a different country, China being the one question. But our question was, okay, is the country of origin really going to matter to the consumer? So we ran the exact same test, same booth, same price, everything. All we changed was the country of origin. And the output that we got was really interesting, because as you can see here, where one may have received a total value of 7 from Mexico, from China it actually decreased 2 points down to a 5. And then also the test price, so what a consumer is willing to pay, or the model price actually decreased about $20 on an average as well. So what we got out of that was, one, okay, if we're going to do this, move this product, then we know where we need to be, right? So it made us rethink, okay, is this smart on our end? And if it is, then we've got to rebuild this product, pick materials and the technology so it fits this pricing parameter in order for it to make sense.
And
go ahead, Gretchen.
I would just add to that this is a great example of the use of the tool, smart use of it. Other things that people test might be, how do you name a certain feature of a product? And, do we call it memory foam or comfort step, right? And different kinds of things like that can be tested in addition to sort of the product overall. Because exactly in this way, if you isolate and run 2 side-by-side tests and change only that one variable, then you're really able to understand the value of a certain feature, how you should name it. Tests have even been run on images and informed decisions about what to feature in store or online. So there are a lot of different ways to use the tool, and this is an interesting example of one of them.
I think it is as well. We should have talked about this, Gretchen, on our sourcing summit thing. I think we kind of buried the lead there because people, and obviously we're talking about a broad range of things today, but if we're talking about sourcing operations, people are obviously looking for ways to mitigate risk in the China marketplace at the Chinese factories. And there's increased costs due to the new tariffs from President Trump. He's tacked on top. So obviously people are moving to Vietnam. That doesn't always work for leather goods. People are looking at India. They're looking at Mexico again. So they're looking at a large number of places. This is another place where you can get data points around that. So I think it's a great way to look at a tool, and we should look at software as how much value can we get out of this company wide, not just for sales, but for other aspects to make better decisions. And Gretchen, there was one question that did come in that I want to get to before we get to the end, because I think it's relevant here. And the question is, when you're allowing a consumer to engage a product and you're allowing them to test it and give you feedback, obviously in this case, you've asked about country of origin. Are there other ways that brands can introduce some of their marketing language ahead of time and test that as well to see if that will influence one way or the other, the way a consumer feels about that?
Absolutely, 100%. One example that comes to mind is, and this is apart from footwear, but I think it's a really strong illustration. We've worked with nutritional supplements companies to test, the claims and descriptions that they make on their products. So that's kind of, one end of the extreme, right? That really gets at how you would test language, claims, descriptions. So that's 100% a very common use case, actually, and also in footwear. I mean, as I mentioned, there are features and descriptions in language about specifically footwear products that we have tested in order to be able to understand what resonates and what doesn't. And the impact that it has on price, on that model price that Stephanie mentioned, which is the indicator of, here's what people are willing to pay.
There was a question that popped in. What's the difference between test price and model price on this? What was we see test price in the middle and model price in green on the right. What do the two different terms mean?
Do you want to answer that, Stephanie?
Oh, sure. So test price is what we are testing, or what, kind of what we wanted to see. And the model price is what the end consumer at the you set your margins. And so at the highest margin, what they're the best that we're going to get out of it. And so the model price right here on made in Mexico, $174 versus the $145 is what they would be willing to pay out of China. So that's where we have about a $20 difference.
Mm-hmm. And the model price has been shown to be predictive of the average selling price of the product across its life cycle.
Great.
Okay.
All right. So we kind of talked about this a little bit, but we saw during COVID, we saw shutdowns at factories. We saw shutdowns that impacted material supply chains across the board. People were working remotely, just like we're doing now, talking on Zoom. So maybe talk a little bit about your operations, what you guys have been trying to do to overcome. Maybe share some happy stories. I'm sure people want to hear some wins.
Sure, right. So no, it has been, and I'll just quickly highlight. So, materials, air freight, all that stuff that we are all overcoming together. But one thing that I think that we're trying to do is we said, stay focused. And I think, it's really trying to, and this is something that I attest that I want to do with First Insight, but the values of our customer, values I feel like are changing, and what your customer wants, whether it's sustainability, longevity, all that kind of stuff. So again, figuring out, making sure that what we were building is true to our customer. And then also with the material issues that, maybe we used to get material from Italy and make a product in Mexico. Well, because of these issues, I think we're trying to really make sure that we use materials that come from that source. So making sure that, getting creative, getting materials from that country so that we're not having to run into lead time issues, costs, everything else. So it's using what we have and being resourceful that way. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, no worries at all. I think that's exactly right. It's optimizing, it's getting the efficiencies. I also think it's, mentally staying focused on what we can control. Obviously there's things that we cannot, and that's where anxiety comes in a lot, and mistakes. But if we can focus, like you say, stay focused on these things that we can control and really optimize. And part of that, I guess, is the second bullet point here is getting the price right with consumer input at the start.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, we test it with First Insight in some cases, and like you're pointing out, that in consumer right now, we know that they do oftentimes want better deals, or they're going to look for the discount. So it's making sure that, again, building it right up front. Being that said, you don't want to take away the value of your brand. And I think that's where you have to make sure too. You don't want to strip it to where there's nothing left, and then you've kind of degraded what you've spent so much time building. So it's being, again, creative, I think, in those aspects. But seeing where a customer wants to be. And I think that also just ladies fashion for us, and I think ladies product in general, is very fickle. We're trying to figure out, I think everyone right now is trying to figure out fashion-wise, are we going towards this athleisure wear for everyone? Or, is she going to want actually some product that she can, so when things open up, she can go out on the town. So again, it's trying to make sure that we get the product right, we test accordingly, and kind of navigate that area.
And then kind of last question on this really is, how has your team, how have your employees adopted this? Have they bought into this? Do they believe in First Insight now and the data that they're getting out of this? Yeah,
I believe, yes. So it's, and at first I think it took a little persuading, but we are getting there. We just had our line closing meeting a couple of weeks ago for our biggest line, and we had to do it over Zoom, which was strange, honestly, for the first time, because again, you're used to like holding a boot and we're having to figure out how to show it, but we had the information there, and because we're starting to see the full cycle of it, it was really great to have the First Insight data with us as well. And so it made for a very well-rounded presentation to our salesmen. And so we're actually about to go have now some meetings with our retailers, and it will be great to be able to present this information to our retailers as well.
Fantastic. I think the next slide we've got. And here we go. What's next? There was one question that came in around this as well, is what do you think is going to happen with women's fashion? I mean, we see athleisure, and you guys are making boot wear, and how do you figure out where you are in this? And obviously you're using First Insight to kind of judge some of that, but what's your gut tell you a little bit too?
Yeah, no, I do think that, so we're seeing things go to, they do want a little bit, it's not complete in your face, but I do think that there is a drive and an interest in having a product that you can get longevity out of. And I don't mean something that's boring, but quality. You want to be able to, I think that's where the leather for us, as we make leather made products, really speaks for itself. The craftsmanship, I think we're really starting to really make sure that we talk about the craftsmanship and what is going into a boot, because if a woman or man is going to spend the type of money, I think they also want to make sure that they can get that wear with many different outfits, but also for a longer period of time. So that's kind of where we're seeing.
And then what around seasonality? You said you got about six cycles a year right now. Yeah. Do you think that's going to increase as you try to refresh product more, or are you going to decrease that and try to get economy of scale? Like, what do you think that where we're headed in the future?
Well, and that's a great question. So I think I think it depends too with your retailer. Some of our retailers that are that are really on the fashion trend, they want to see those 6 lines. Whereas I think some of our really core customers, maybe the brick and mortar smaller ones, those are the ones that I think are only going to want to see the 2 to 3 lines a year. They're really looking for, let's get the volume in there and let's keep it more tight. They want to make sure that they get it right. They're not necessarily as up to moving product as as quick as in fashion as much.
That's a great point. And then what's next with First Insight as we start into that? Because, I think the two points here are really important. Is like, you've got the tool, you've implemented it, people are starting to buy into it. How do you get more out of it? And then how do you integrate it more into more of your operations and more of your kind of digital, whatever other software you have going?
That's a great question. So I think that really starting to make sure that we integrate these into our meetings with retailers. I'm planning on meeting with our account manager soon to make sure that we present this in a very well-rounded way. I think that making sure that we have this in a format that our retailers can see and that they can access. And again, making sure that they only see the information that we want them to see. But then also, I think that in areas that we really need to test and with digital, because everything like we're saying, I don't see us not working from home or digitally for a long time. So, but I think that really, how can we, in some of our areas, when I first talked about Dan Post, I mentioned the hand cushion comfort. How can we display that message? Something that you can't actually see, but it's there. I think that's where we've got to really make sure that we tell the comfort story in our digital ecosystem, really, and how can we test that within First Insight and make part of, I think, who Dan Post is and our story into this digital mix, if that makes sense.
It does.
Yeah.
Great. And then I think we'll go to the next.
This might be a good time to mention, you brought this up briefly before, Andy, but the opportunities are there to integrate into PLM systems and planning systems. And, that's kind of the 404 level course versus the 101 level course. But, it definitely is driving a lot of value at a number of our customers. And so, once people kind of get their feet wet and up to speed with using the tool, that can be just a huge value unlock.
And I'll say too, for First Insight, as you get started, the main thing is that you don't have to integrate it into anything. They run the system for you. So that's a very important point, that you can integrate that as you go along. So if you need to start up very quickly, instead of trying to figure out how you're going to work software together and do middleware and all that stuff, First Insight's already got it figured out for you. So that's a huge win. And I guess the second point is, just to put a plug in, we're developing a whole series on new digital tools and digital ecosystems, from how you use design software to PLM to how you plug into e-commerce solutions and platforms to get the data flowing back and forth. And that's on footweardigitaltransformation.com. It's a mouthful, but it's footweardigitaltransformation.com, and it's super affordable for anyone that wants to test out or learn all the different software that's out there and how you actually use it and structure workflow after he's trying to help set that up with the footwearists around those different things, of which First Insight is a major partner and will be contributing around the e-commerce section of that series. So if we'll go to the next slide here.
Yeah, this leads in really well, actually, that, it is a straightforward process. And, a key thing is that these results are available fast, because, as Stephanie mentioned earlier, there's definitely a need for speed. And so, getting these results back quickly, and then, using this information to help inform both internal decisions, but then also the dialogue with retail partners for win-win decisions. I mean, let's face it, what everybody wants is for these decisions to make sense, both for the brand supplying and, for the retail partner, and of course for the consumer. So, the goal here is to really glue that all together and deliver it well and quickly.
Great. We're at question time, which is good. We're at 11:55. We got 5. If we go in a little bit, that's fine too. All our folks are still with us, which means that Stephanie and Gretchen did a fantastic job. I'm always subpar, but I'm fine with that. First off, one of the questions was, Stephanie, are you applying First Insight's testing across all your styles, or just a subset of your lines right now?
That's a great Great question. So I think we're really trying to focus in on, when you look at some that are kind of volume styles, or, and I hate to say that you go with your gut, but they're your basic ones. Those are kind of areas where we're not really putting the test to right now. Really, where we're leaving for First Insight is for ones that we're really unsure about. Women's fashion, some new products that we're really testing, new outsoles or comfort systems, something that is really unknown is where we really leave most of the test to. And then at the end, when we've finalized the line, then we will generally test everything. But the beginning is just really unknown tests or unknown categories that are really new.
Right.
I could add that that's actually a pretty common approach, and that, particular high value is seen for companies when they're even entering maybe into a new sector, or a new space. Kind of white space testing. That's been a pretty common and valuable use case as well.
Great point. Another question for Stephanie is, you mentioned that you have 6 lines a year, 6 cycles a year. Is that per brand or per line? Are all of them 6 at this point?
So all of them are 6 at this point.
Ooh.
I know. There's a lot of yeah. We're going through the erasers, right? No, yeah.
Well, that's where you start going back 2 years ago and saying, pull up those shoes.
Right? Yeah, start pulling them out. Yeah.
That's really good. Let's go to Gretchen. A question came in. You talked about, we've been talking a lot about shoes and Dan post boot company in particular, but is there more broader, other categories or other geographies? One question came in, it's like, does First Insight work in Europe and India and other places? Do you guys work worldwide on these trends and asking global consumers these questions?
Sure. So to start with the categories, we are definitely active and delivering value across a really broad range of product areas, from sporting goods to jewelry to home goods, to all kinds of fashion and apparel. And so there really are not limitations to the product categories. And then geography is interesting because we see it in 2 ways. One is we actually are on the ground and present in both Europe and India. But we also are able to help companies who maybe are headquartered in the US, let's say, or in a European country, but they need to test product in a lot of different geographies and markets. And so the beauty of that is that many of those companies would historically have brought in their teams from all over the world, into one of these face-to-face line reviews and make these decisions. And now they're able to actually very quickly get input from consumers in all those geographies and have the teams review that information and drive solid decisions. So that's the answer there.
Yeah, and Stephanie, to those digital line reviews that you were doing over Zoom, I don't want to get into any trade secrets, but how did it go? Were people fine with it? Did you guys do this where you share the screen and you can look at the data and look at the shoe and everybody has their input? Is that how it went? Is that how you guys did it?
I'll be honest. I'll be the first to. I remember talking to Gretchen before this. I was like, I am so scared. So I was so afraid that everyone was like, they were not going to follow social etiquette and talk over each other. But everyone was very respectful, and we did. So the product development team, we presented. Because we're doing so many virtual meetings, we had the cameras and everything set up with all of the product, and then when needed, we shared our screens for when we're discussing data, or if just one of the salesmen, we were able to use that tool when needed. So it went really well. Surprisingly.
Kind of last question as we wrap this whole thing up. There's always this rub, and we can start with Gretchen and then we'll go to Stephanie. There's always this rub of, and more today than ever, that I want to cut costs. I don't want to invest right now. Mm-hmm. When we look at this software and really see it, I think, and you guys can draft off this, I think the real winners will be the people who aren't pinching the pennies, but are willing to spend the nickels to get the dollar back. So when we talk about First Insight, Gretchen, what kind of ROI are your clients telling you that they see in terms of speed, getting the price right, their margins are a lot better, et cetera? Like what's kind of the ROI argument that you guys make to brands?
Wow. So I could probably talk about this for half an hour, but I will be brief. So a couple of things come to mind. Number one, we are seeing very commonly significant reductions in time to market. I'm talking like taking 4 months out of the new product timelines compared to the old world of making the physical samples and doing maybe in-store testing and doing those initial results reviews and then making the final buy decisions. We're seeing a number of our customers with at least a line of sight to maybe 70% reductions in numbers of samples. And, then you can do your own math based on your company of what the value of that would be, but it tends to be a big number, especially in footwear, right? We are also seeing, and again, specific to footwear, a big way to make this pay for itself very quickly is just to avoid one bad decision. So, we saw a case of a boot that had very elaborate stitching and work on the shaft. Unfortunately, the consumer did not value it at anywhere near a price point that would justify that cost. And so that company said, okay, that one's not going to market. And in fact, what they did was they went back and found a way of creating something similar at a much lower cost, and then they relaunched it. Now, you guys know better than I do what the cost impact of that is and what the inventory impact and the markdown impact would have been had they taken that shoe or that boot to market. So, that's what we see over and over again, is that even just looking at avoiding the bad buys more than pays for the use of our tool.
Yeah, I would, yeah. So for us, I would really, in product development, salesman samples. Let's talk about the cost of salesman samples. We have, over 20 that we make per style. And on a given year, with 150, you do the math. So for us, it was really reducing the areas where we don't need to make those salesman samples. And then to Gretchen's point too, it's just inventory, not buying that style because we feel like it's a great boot. And then we have all these closeouts. So that's for us where we have really valued First Insight. And for us, that pays for itself right there, so well over.
Great. Well, I think we've hit the end of our time. Sadly, we could probably go on for another 30 minutes talking about things. I'm always curious about what people are doing. Congratulations to Dan Post Boot Company, the whole team there, for the adaptation to these times, but also being ahead of the game and using First Insight and looking at other tools and other ways to optimize. And obviously that's going to pay off. And we hope other people take lessons that we've shared here today and apply that to your operations. And also, obviously, working with someone like First Insight, who not only can help you with those line reviews, help test pricing, look at your sourcing strategies. It seems to be a multitude of wins across all different departments for using First Insight, including those data points, the behavioral data points at the very beginning. So it's not just, First Insight software, it's their thought leadership and the ability to work with brands to help them see the future and get there. So for that, I want to thank First Insight for their partnership with FDRA this year. Gretchen, thank you and your team. Always accessible, always thoughtful, sharing the stuff that you guys are learning and passing it around. We really appreciate that. And I put a big plug in for anyone who doesn't have First Insight plugged in or is not using them, to contact Gretchen and her team to at least get a demo, see what you're missing out on. We showed some of it here. There's certainly more that they could show you about how they could optimize your operations and increase those margins so that you can be profitable and succeed and not just stay above the waterline. And Stephanie, thank you so much for being on today and being open and willing to share what you guys are doing and working and transforming. And again, congratulations to you guys. Really appreciate your time.
No, thank you.
Thank you,
Great.
Andy. Thank you,
Absolutely.
Stephanie.
Thank you. Folks, as always, you can stay plugged in with FDRA. Go to our website, fdra.org. You can see our full webinar series, great webinars like this, full insights. We work with our partners where we're not really trying to make sales pitches. We're really trying to transform and solve your solutions, just like First Insight is. That's why they're such a great partner to us and the industry. And also look at the event calendar that's coming up for different events, as well as our members can plug into our resource center and find a number of different data points and reports for all sorts of departments across shoe companies. All right, folks, I know it was a little bit longer because that was a webinar recording that we did, but there's so many good insights, Jasmine. Jasmine, help me run the webinar. So Jasmine, a few takeaways just off the top of your head. What were a few things of note that you took from the webinar?
Well, one, I think Sarah and Gretchen had like a great back and forth. We definitely captured a lot of everyone's attention, got great questions. Like that's how we know that like we're executing a great webinar, when we're like retaining our audience, when, you know, people are staying engaged throughout the conversation. So it was really good to have that webinar and to see everybody so interested in it from beginning to end.
Yeah, people were engaged, and it's always good to hear from different segments of the industry. So obviously, we've got a boot maker, a boot brand that's putting product out there, and they're approaching it in similar ways to other people's and a little bit different than other people are. And that's the beauty of our industry is figuring out what fits for your culture, your workforce, and hopefully some of these ideas that Stephanie was talking about can resonate. Maybe you can take some of those away and implement them on your end. But definitely, I do want to reiterate First Insight's support for FDRA and our industry, delivering key data, but also the system is absolutely amazing in how it delivers value across departments in shoe companies. So if you've never demoed First Insight and their capabilities to help you develop better product at the right price without having to heavily discount, drop us a line, info@fdra.org. We'll be happy to make the introduction. But with that, I do want to thank everybody for listening today. Again, got ideas for topics, got ideas for guests, drop us a line at shoeandshow.com. At the bottom left-hand side, there's a little audio button. You click on that, you send us an audio message, and we'll respond. And with that, I think that wraps it up. On behalf of Matt Priest and Jasmine Pendergrass, this is Andy Polk, and Shoe In is out.
Shoe In has been brought to you by the FDRA, the Footwear Industries Association focused on retail, trade, politics, and fashion, helping create and enhance conversations on all things footwear. For information about FDRA, visit fdra.org.